Welcome to the Modern Worship Series, Electric Guitar. This is the new and improved and updated version of electric guitar with my good friend Ben Gowell. And Ben has just been rocking it for the last couple of years on the road and on the last album that I did, and just a great player, plays with a lot of artists like Sarah Groves and Michael Olson, and fortunately he's been my sidekick here for a couple of years now. So I just thought that this video, you know, with what Ben does, to me has a very modern sound. His sounds, his choice of notes, his choice of parts is very modern sounding. And sometimes we just wonder, how do we do that? You know, how do we figure out this pedal board? How do we figure out what parts to play? And I see electric guitarists kind of frustrated and constantly struggling to figure out where they fit in on a Sunday morning. You know, how much to play, how much not to play, and a lot of those things. So the first thing we're going to ask you to do is download the booklet. Go to the internet, and you see the link there, and just go ahead and download the booklet that goes with this DVD. And throughout the video, you can follow along with the booklet, and it'll just make more sense. You can also rewind and go back and forth. But the whole goal of this DVD is found in Scripture. In Psalm 33:3, it says, "Play skillfully and shout for joy." I mean, that's the essence of why we're even doing this, and the essence of why you even purchased this DVD is because you obviously want to be more skilled at what you do. And another great scripture is in 1 Chronicles 25. It says, "All the musicians were trained and skilled in music for the Lord." And I just love that as a foundation as we get started, that all this practicing, learning different sounds and hooks. And why do that? Because that's what we're called to do if you feel called to be part of what God's doing in the earth today through worship, through this kind of modern worship movement, how God is using it to draw people to Himself. So let's just get that foundational scripture in our hearts, that all the musicians were trained and skilled in music for the Lord. And Ben is going to help us kind of decipher and figure out and unpack how to make beautiful music out of this instrument, bro. Ben Gowell.
We'll have some fun.
One thing I appreciate about you, Ben, and maybe you just have philosophically have a thought on, as a worship leader, I appreciate the fact that I always feel like you're supporting what I'm doing and kind of blending in and kind of anticipating where I'm going. And you're sensitive to the Spirit. I mean, what's going through your mind just foundationally as an electric guitar player in a band?
Yeah, well, I too have the privilege of leading worship at my home church in Minneapolis. And so I know what it's like to have a band who I really feel supported by, you know. And so I try to make it my goal as I'm playing a supporting role, playing electric guitar for Paul or other people, that I would be engaged, and that through my attentiveness and being there and being engaged, that would, you know, be a part of my worship, attitude of worship to God, and hopefully that supports what's going on. You know?
Yeah. So to get started, go ahead and download the booklet, tune up, let's tune up, and I'm going to be kind of popping in and out of the video throughout. You know, some of this Ben is just going to kind of take over and kind of show us some things. Then I'll kind of pop in and ask some questions, and kind of we'll demonstrate some things together. So let's go ahead and tune up and let's get started.
We're going to take a look at a lot of things today. We're going to take a look at some chord shapes, some soloing ideas. We're going to get into some effects, pedals, and things like that. And just want to start out by talking about the electric guitarist's role in a band. You know, I think one of the biggest things that's important about playing in a band is communication with the rest of the band and listening, for starters. You know, a lot of times it's easy for us, I think especially guitar players, to get in the mix of a band and we just all of a sudden start playing, put this thing in our hands and we can't help but play it. And my wife could testify to the fact that it's hard to carry on a conversation with me when I don't have a guitar in my hand. But when we're starting to make music with a band, I find the first thing that's important to do is just listen to what's going on around you. The importance of playing as a band and playing clean as a band comes down to everyone not walking on each other. The importance of creating space for each other in a band is huge, I think. And so I start off in working with the worship team talking about, is it going to be a guitar or piano-driven song that we're going to be playing? And once we have that established, creating space for each instrument to happen. So we've got the bass player. If we're thinking of it in terms of sonic space, we've got the bass player covering the low end, and the keyboard player and the acoustic guitar and things like that kind of in the middle range. But also those instruments working to not step on each other. And then electric guitar and other lead instruments, usually we're looking at getting higher up in the voicings. A lot of times when I'm on electric guitar, I'll look to get higher up in the range to stay out of the way of the acoustic guitar and the piano, so that we're each complementing each other and not competing with each other. I think that's an important thing in a band setting. So we'll be looking at some different chord shapes today. The idea will be to try to play any given chord, a G chord for instance. Instead of just being able to play a G chord in this one position, try to get a broader chord vocabulary to be able to play it in several different places. A lot of different G chords over the neck. And for electric guitar in particular, a lot of times it's, again, those higher voicings that will keep us out of the way of the other instruments. And sometimes if you have maybe a flute player or a violin player in the band, just communicating about who's playing what parts. I think the way I approach playing the electric guitar is always trying to create a part for the song, as opposed to just zoning out into my catalog of blues licks that I've learned, or any given thing. I'm always trying to think about how can I add to the song. How can what I'm playing, better the song. I think if everyone in the band comes into that, into a rehearsal or into a concert with that mindset, then the whole band will end up sounding musical. That's what makes it musical, is when everyone's wanting to add to the whole and complement one another. So let's take a look at some chord shapes for starters. I think it's important when you're on electric guitar or in any backup musician role where there's a leader, it's important to follow the leader by being engaged. When I'm playing for Paul or backing up anybody and playing more of a supportive role, I always want to try to be engaged and focused on what the leader's doing, where the leader's going. And I think as it comes down to worship, thinking about how can we worship on our instrument, I think some big practical ways. One is just focusing on who's leading, being engaged that way. We talked a bit about communicating and just preferring one another. Sometimes a tough concept to get into in the music world because it just is. But the importance of preferring one another and being engaged in what's going on and not zoning out. I want to bring my whole self to what's going on, And I view that as a part of my worship to God in a worship setting, So I want to encourage you as you're playing guitar and getting into soloing and stuff, to learn, to work hard at your craft. It's important for us to practice, work on different chord shapes, work on soloing ideas, but for the purpose of, being able to bring a heart of worship through what we're doing. Whether we're leading and out front and in the spotlight or totally just backing up and adding our little part, the mindset stays the same to, want to bring all we have to that part, whether it be, just a little just a simple little arpeggiated part like that could be really fitting for a specific spot in the song to just bring some color. And so it's important to remember that no matter how small the part seems, part of being a real good team player is playing that part and playing it well. So I want to encourage you to play with your whole heart, to worship through your instrument, as you're learning scales and things like that, to not get so hung up in the technical stuff that we forget about, the heart of why we're doing it. The importance of, and I want to sing through this thing to God, as it were. I want to worship through this instrument, and that when it's my turn to play a solo or your turn to play a solo, that our playing would inspire worship in people. Especially in a worship context, ripping into a solo or playing a big solo is not about hey, look at me, check out this great solo, but it's about, man, playing that thing confidently, stepping out and playing it confidently, but playing it with the heart that, man, we want to worship God with this. The singers, we're singing out songs, and then if there's a solo, perhaps it's time for the guitar to inspire worship in people. So always having that mindset, the importance of a heart of worship as we're playing, and keeping the main thing, keeping our priorities right. In this section, we're going to be looking at bar chords. And if bar chords are not familiar to you, we're going to start just at the real basic spot and go through some different forms. All a bar chord means is a movable chord, like open chord positions. A lot of those open sounding chords where we have open strings ringing, we can't move around the neck because it just doesn't work. So with a bar chord, we're taking our index finger, and that's becoming the job that the nut here was doing. Basically, our index finger is taking that job, and it allows us to make a chord and keep the shape the same with our left hand, and just move up and down the neck. Because there's no open strings ringing, we can get a lot of different chords. And so we're going to start off with the E form bar chords, and it's called E form because the actual shape looks like an E major chord, okay? And basically what we're doing, just taking that E major chord shape and being able to move that up and down the neck. Now, first of all, before I get into this, an important thing to do if you're working on fretboard memorization and trying to, you've learned some open chords but trying to get up the neck a little more, I tell people who are wanting to get better at knowing what the notes are, just take the low E string and the A string and work on memorizing what all these notes are all the way up to the 12th fret where it repeats, for the open string. So you can know quickly, you got E, B flat, D flat, A, F sharp. Just knowing what all those notes are, because a lot of these bar chord shapes are based off of the notes on these strings. So the E form, for instance, which we're looking at, the actual chords we're playing are based off of these notes on the E string. So if this is an A note, there's an A major chord. And we're going to go across the paper you should have with you there. We're going to go across and play through some different types of chords. The G note there, we have G major chord. And the second shape on the page there is a major 7. Third shape is a dominant 7. Fourth shape is a minor 7. Next shape, a half diminished chord, or a minor 7 flat 5. And then a fully diminished chord. Now, in modern rock music or modern worship music, a lot of times we don't find diminished chords. We find them more in jazz and gospel. So if you get into that side of things, you'll use more diminished chords and flat 9s and sharp 9s, things like that. But you can also use them in ways in modern rock as well. So those are the E form shapes. Now let's take a look at the A form bar chords. A form bar chords are based off of the notes on the A string. That's where our root note will be. And again, it's called A form because it looks like an A major chord. And again, we're just barring that and being able to move that. Okay, so if we have a D note there, we've got D major, D major 7, D dominant 7, D minor 7, D half diminished, and D fully diminished. And again, these 6 shapes that we're covering here. There's a lot more that we could cover, and there's a lot of great stuff out there that you could find, but I find that these are good shapes to start with. If you get these shapes down, it's a good starting block, and then it's kind of endless from there. But this is a good place to start again, so learning these shapes. So we've covered E form and A form, and both of those forms are really full sounding. With the E form, both those shapes we're using most of the strings. The E form we're using all 6 strings, and the A form we're using 5 strings. So very full sounding chords, great for doing rhythm stuff, and some body to the sound. The next form is C form, and C form are based off of the notes on the A string again. Again, we're just taking a C major chord shape. So that would be because my bass note's an E. That would be an E major chord, E major 7, E dominant 7, E minor 7, E half diminished in inversion. In this shape, we're using what's called an inversion, and then E fully diminished. Okay? Again, that C form is a fairly full-sounding chord. Now, the next two are the ones I get most excited about talking about because the D form and the G form are great shapes for electric guitar. We talked about at the beginning about trying to get up higher on the neck and stay out of the way of the acoustic guitar and the piano. And a lot of times that just comes down to either one, playing less in general, or playing on less strings, higher up, and leaving out, a lot of times even leaving out the lowest 2 strings. So let's take a look at the D form chords. We've got, and the D form are based off of the root note being on the D string. So there's a G note, G major, G major 7, G dominant 7, G minor 7, G half diminished, and G fully diminished. And a great use, for this, just playing an example here for you. On Paul's new record, for instance, I would take on the song, just for an example, the song What Can I Do? I think it's track 6. But the song What Can I Do? For the chorus, I'm just using a very simple, again, parts can sometimes be really simple to be effective. And for the chorus of that song, I'm just using basically this shape and arpeggiating through it. I'll play an example here. I'll play what the acoustic guitar would be doing first. I'll put it in the key of G for now. I think it's an A flat on the album, but I'll play it in G for simplicity's sake here. So this type of thing might be what the acoustic guitar is doing. And then on the electric, I might be doing.
But thank you, what can I do but give my life to you? Hallelujah, hallelujah, what can I do?
Just as a nice part up high to complement what the acoustic guitar is doing. So there I was using the D form and even taking away that lowest string. So I was basically just doing the top 3 strings, just a triad, and picking around in that. I'll just show you what I was doing just by itself without any effects on. And just arpeggiating through that. So just changing one or two notes in there to correspond to what's going on underneath in the acoustic. Get a lot of guys who ask, if I'm not playing full chords and I'm not playing a solo, what's all the stuff in between that can happen? And that's the stuff that really, I think, makes electric guitar parts come alive, is the stuff that's more of common tones within a scale over the chords that are going on underneath. And again, every time a chord changes in the acoustic, not fully changing the chord, but just adding one note that will kind of suspend well over what the acoustic guitar player is doing. So that's just an example of taking this D form and playing a little idea out of it. And then the last shape we have is G form bar chord, which the full shape is it's a bit of a stretch. And I would never actually probably use this chord. Very rarely would I use it in an actual playing context. Just not that practical of a chord, once in a while. So a lot of times what I'll do is lose these lowest two strings again and just go to the top four. Still the full major chord there, but we don't have the bass stuff getting in the way. Again, a lot of times just creating that space once again for the bass player to do his part and the acoustic guitar player to do his part. So now this G shape I look at a little differently than the rest because it's really cool in that it has a major scale within the shape right here. So there's the shape by itself. There's the major scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And we can take that shape, and again, talking about this common tone thing, which is a really, really effective thing in modern worship and modern rock music to do, to take that and be able to have those shapes ringing out over the top as common tones over chord progression. I'll play in another example so you can hear what I might use this for as an example. So we'll play in just an acoustic part. So we're in the key of G. The acoustic guitar player is playing G, C, E minor, D. So I'm going to find my G shape up here. Okay. And I'm going to start with it closed off and actually just a power chord shape and just play a little counter melody that could kind of, again, act as some glue over the top of this. So. Just as an example of one thing I might do with that G form. Again, just adding one note per chord change that corresponds with the chord changes. And there's no set scientific formula for that. There's no exact thing that you have to do. It's just an idea of maybe hearing a little counter melody. Da, na, 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 na. That's kind of the top note. And the rest is just droning ones and fives of the scale, which if you have the Music Theory Made Easy DVD, won't get too much into music theory, but we've got the ones and fives droning out, and then that little melody just kind of creeping in. Again, we don't want to get in the way of the vocal, what the vocal's doing either, so just kind of creating subtle counter melodies that will help to shape just a little part that's going on. So the G form and the D form are great for that. And maybe you have two acoustic guitar players in your band and no electric, and there again, one guy taking those higher shapes, the D form or the G form, and just playing more of a secondary part to complement what the primary acoustic guitar player is playing. So again, the idea is to not walk on top of each other, but to create a sense of unity with what's going on, to add to what each other are doing, and that's what makes music happen. Music starts to happen at that point. So. We've talked some about getting bar chords involved and just trying to be able to play in different spots over the neck, and also a huge part of playing guitar, especially with rock music, is getting familiar with the power chord.
Power chords.
And all a power chord is just, a major chord is made up of a 1, 3, and a 5, and power chord is just 1s and 5s. So there's no thirds in the chord, which just makes for a very tight-sounding chord. Really, great for rock rhythm because it's not major or minor, so it's real tight, especially when you get some distortion on it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Great sound.
So maybe using that in, Hosanna? Just the chorus of that? Play the chorus and just show where I would use that in the song.
So on the verse or the chorus?
Just on the chorus there.
All right, so we're going, when we see you, we find strength to face the day. Washed away, Hosanna, Hosanna, you are the God, worthy of all sound of hearts returning to you. We turn to you. Yeah, that's cool, man. It adds such power. It adds such power when you go to a chorus and you step on that distortion pedal and then you're just playing, like you said, 1s and 5s. A lot of times I've noticed on sheet music it'll say like a E5 or a G5 or a D5. Basically, that's a power chord.
Yeah,
right?
I would just play a power chord if I saw that on a chart. Just real tight chord, and great for thickening up a chorus like that. You know, if I wasn't going to go to a higher picking thing, sometimes just to fatten up the sound, I might go to power chords for a chorus. So yeah, very usable.
So slowing that down a little bit. Again, you use that all the time. We're doing the G. So on the chorus, Hosanna, and you're playing up like a higher one. It looks like, and then
basically kind of like four different shapes across the strings. There's that one starting on the E string, and the next one over looks the same, but it starts on the A string, and then we go over to the next 3 strings, and the shape changes because the B string is a little bit.
No, that was a
weird.
different chord, though, right? Wasn't that a C power chord?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. So chords we're going to G,
then
C. There's an F power chord right there.
And there's your F right there. I like that.
Yep.
So just
there's the root.
I find it helpful to just always find that root in the chord shape. Always kind of find the root, so it's like that's your anchor, and you kind of learn the notes of the neck that way as well, right?
Absolutely. And then the top one, just that right there, which would be a B flat power chord. So G, C.
So there's 4 types, right?
Yeah.
So let's do like a couple G. Do the first position G.
So there'd be
the
a G
next
power
one.
chord there.
Be like,
We can hop up to there,
and
and then up high.
all right. So let's just say if I was playing a song and it just had a G rhythm, why don't you kind of show us how you go from one to the next? 1, 2, 3, 4. Go to C now, C. Let's go to F. Sorry. B flat. E flat. A flat. Let's go back to G. 1, 2.
Yeah.
That's kind of weird.
Keeping me on my toes, man.
All those flat keys. But that's cool. I mean, it's cool to get that in your brain, those shapes for
Totally.
sure.
A great tool from just memorizing fretboard, working in different keys that you might not normally work in, A flat, E flat, and just trying to get quick at just recognizing, power chords are a great place to start for that because they're not overly, complex. So just work on knowing where those are at.
Also, it comes in handy when, if you're the electric guitarist and you're playing along with another guitarist, and if the acoustic guitar player or the other electric player is kind of playing down here, I noticed that Ben will always jump up an octave. So instead of playing in the same range, he's up and he might even go higher. What's it sound like? It just kind of spreads out that dynamic range.
Yeah.
Just for whatever it's worth, I mean, I used to have this exercise I used to do to try to get this in my own brain. It was kind of setting a metronome. Again, when you practice with a metronome, it's like quantum. It's like quantum practice time because you're actually accomplishing your timing, your fretboard, memorizing your fretboard, knowing the actual voicings and fingerings of these chords. And so you're doing about 4 or 5 exercises at once. So just imagine this with me. And I think in the booklet we have at least 3 of the power chords. And you can follow this exercise where you start with G. So it's like 1, 2, 3, then find the next G. And there's the G. Always look for the root and say it out loud. There's the root. I think G, 2, 3, and then here's, G. There's G right there on the A string. And then Ben was doing this one. That's a little extra credit there.
Yep.
But let's just say, if we just even getting those first 3 in your brain. So we're going 1, there's the root, and then there's G, and here's a G, G, let's go back down, G, down to the low G. Now we're gonna go to C, C, to a C, to a higher C, and I'm visualizing the C as I say it, and there's C, there's the root, and back to C. And just look at the chart and just kind of go through the whole, the circle of fifths to a metronome and just keep it slow. And before you know it, instead of just hanging on this one chord during a song, you're going to find yourself kind of going up to this one, and then you're just going to be all over the neck. And you won't be guessing because you'll have visualized, oh, there's the root. Okay, there's the root. There's the root. So give that a shot. Any other pointers?
Yeah, I think just along those lines, just equipping yourself with as many different possibilities of where to play the chord. So I see the chord on a chart, and I think it's just helpful to be able to play it in as many different spots to give yourself options to work with.
And I would say on a priority level, electric guitar-wise, I would spend
power chords
way
is
more
huge.
time on this power chord idea and knowing all those voicings than trying to become, a great soloist. Because the fact is, typically on Sunday morning worship, solos are fairly limited, right?
Yeah.
I mean, whereas power chords and playing a strong rhythm part is really a big portion of what we try to accomplish.
Yeah,
electric guitar.
absolutely. So in the last section, we talked a lot about bar chords and getting into some fuller shapes. In this section, we're going to start breaking it down even more and getting into triads. And just for the purpose, again, you'll hear me talking about this a lot, but creating even more space. So triad, any major or minor chord is just made up of 3 notes. And for a major chord, it's a 1, a major 3, and a 5. And for a minor chord, the same, except for you make the third, you flat the third. So with triads here, just going to go through some major triads, and we're just playing 3 strings for this exercise. We're just doing the G string, the B string, and the high E. And we're going to play the triads up the neck in 3 different inversions. We can have either the root on the bottom, or the 5th on the bottom, or the 3rd on the bottom. And so you just follow along on the page that you have there. We'll start off with some C major triads. And there's one with the 5th on the bottom. There's one with the root on the bottom. And there's one with the 3rd on the bottom. And then it repeats up to 5th on the bottom again. So it's a full C major chord there, but we're just playing those 3 notes. And this is a great exercise, one, for just helping you to get around the fretboard more, to be able to know, again, what is the great unknown beyond the 5th fret or beyond the open chords. And this is a great way just to get knowing what notes these are up here, but also really applicable in songs too, which we'll go over some songs in a little bit and talk about how these shapes can be used. But just getting comfortable those are all C major chords, just in different versions. So if we were to take just an exercise, maybe if you have a metronome that you can use that will keep it steady, and just take those C major triads for starters and just go up the neck and then back down with that click, So if we have 1, 2, maybe change chords every 2 clicks. 1, 2, 3, 4. Staying steady with that click so that you're working on timing, working on these positions, and just getting comfortable using these triads up high. And once you have the C, you're familiar with the C triad, then moving on to a different chord, like if we were to take a G, for instance, we would start here with the 3rd on the bottom, and then we're going to walk up, the 5th on the bottom, and then we're going to root on the bottom, and then we're back up once again to 3rd on the bottom. So you can play these any different chord, again, any different major chord. You can take those shapes and just go through and work on that as an exercise. So those are major triads, and in the same way there's also minor triads. So just for an example, here's an A minor triad. A lot of times we think of an A minor chord having to be that full chord, but here again, just playing these 3 notes makes a full minor triad. So we have that position, the root on the bottom, the 3rd on the bottom, the 5th on the bottom, and then back up to our starting position. So again, going through, just trying to stay steady with the metronome. 1, 2, 3, 4. As an exercise, and then taking different minor chords from there on out and just working the different spots of the fretboard. Here would be B minor, okay, so B minor, and again, any chord there. So great to use for exercises, and like we showed when we were working on the bar chords, even just arpeggiating through a simple major triad can create a really cool electric guitar color or texture part. Again, that's not so much a solo or not playing full chords, but just like we were doing with that part on What Can I Do, the song What Can I Do off of Paul's newest album. Just that simple major triad there, that shape. Just all based off of that one triad shape. Just adding a suspension on there, going down and adding a second, and can create really cool parts. In the same way with a minor triad, a lot of times in funk music or funkier things, an electric guitar part will just be a simple minor triad played with a funkier rhythm. And I'll demonstrate that. Just an example of what that might be. So we get our wah pedal going here. And just taking this A minor triad that we were looking at, and just creating a rhythmic part, maybe something like this. Again, a really, for the most part, in my left hand, really simple part, just sliding up to that triad, going up to B minor triad, and the rhythmic work is in my right hand. So triads can be used, again, as a great exercise, but also in really practical ways to add parts that will stay out of the way of the rest of the instruments and give you space to work on the higher strings. I'd like to take a look at doing this arpeggiated triad idea again over a different song. This is a greater song off of Paul's record that we did, and instead of using the top 3 strings, I'm still doing this triad idea, but using the D, G, and B strings. And again, thinking more in working in common tones, so I'm not changing a whole chord each time Paul changes a chord, but I'm thinking more just changing one note, and that'll kind of sit over the top of what he's playing.
Interesting.
All based just off of these, I'm just playing these 3 strings and just playing through those triads as a part.
So I'm to sing a greater song, a greater song to you on the earth, to sing a greater song, a greater song to you on the earth. Let's take a close-up of that. So what are you doing on the first chord? I'm playing a G.
So there I'm just playing a full G major triad.
And then I'm playing like a D over F sharp.
Yep, so then I step down to just move that root note down a half step.
Okay, and then I'm playing an E minor.
Then I go down
It's like a G.
Yep. Kind of like an E minor 7 triad without the third. So it's not really minor. It turns into E, B, and then a D. And then down to kind of a C chord in first inversion with the third on the bottom.
Now you could have played, when you saw the chord chart, you could have just played G, D,
Yeah.
E minor, and C.
Yep.
So what made you come up with that? What's your thought process in coming up with a part?
Yeah, I like to, particularly on electric guitar, there's so much opportunity to create an actual part to a song as opposed to just thinking through chords or thinking through, all the changes the same way the acoustic guitar would. I try to think of what's a part that I can add that's kind of like a counter melody to the vocal but doesn't get in the way of the vocal, and it's kind of like a hook that people hear and go, oh, there's something going on that's not just the chords changing, but there's an actual part going on with the electric guitar.
A lot of times, guitarists don't think like musicians. Have you found that? I hate to offend any guitarists, but many times us guitarists, we kind of tend to get into our chord thing, and we just see a chord on a chart and we just go chord, 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 instead of stepping back for a minute and thinking like an arranger or thinking like a musician. So the process that Ben's talking about, kind of listen to what's going on first, and listen to the vocal and see if there's something you can do that doesn't get in the way. So notice, sing a greater song is a long note value, so while that note value is being held out, he's kind of doing this thing underneath that's got more activity. Long, so 1, 2, to sing a greater song, to sing a greater song to you on the earth, to sing a greater song, to sing. Let's go to the next section. Greater song to you on the next section. 2, 3, 4. Hallelujah. We want to lift you higher. Hallelujah. We want to lift you higher. Hallelujah. We want to lift you higher. Hallelujah. We want to lift you higher.
Yeah. So thinking through of coming in and thickening it up. Once the band comes in, gets big, I can drop down to more of a chordal thing. So try to variety, try to spice it up.
Definitely adds so much energy when he just steps on that pedal at just the right time and just crunches it out,
Okay, so we've gone from bar chords to just 3-note triads, and now breaking it down even further, just going to be looking at a note and a harmony note above it, or a 2-note interval. And a lot of times we find, again, that less is more. Sometimes just playing a very simple 2-note part or in the midst of a solo can be the right thing. So let's look at this, and we'll take for instance, the G major scale. Okay, and we're just going to play these shapes, which you'll have on your paper in front of you there. Just play through that scale and play a harmony note, for starters, a sixth above it. So we've got okay, so we're just playing the major scale and then a harmony note above it. And this is particularly for the key of G right there. You can play it in any key moving across the fretboard, but this is for the key of G. So, one place where this might be really useful is if, say, you're just vamping over a progression. Dial in my looper here for you. And you want to mix in with a solo or just kind of more of a melodic part. Playing what the acoustic guitar player might be playing again. Just a simple rhythm, just as an example. Mixing in that interval with now going to that G shape like we talked about. Just as an example of where we might use those intervals of a sixth. And you can use a number of different types of intervals. That's just one for an example. Another one would be interval of a third. In the key of G there. Again, just to intersperse throughout your soloing is a possibility. And so working on some of those, for starters, is another good tool to be able to use in your soloing. And then breaking it down even further, we're going to get into what's called octaves. And we've talked about full chords, harmonies, and now what we're getting into is just a note and a note, the octave above it. So one of my favorite jazz guitarists, Wes Montgomery, was great at using octaves really fast to use in jazz music. Kind of with this thumb technique. But it also translates over to modern rock and modern worship music really well to use to fatten up like a lead line for a song. Say we've got a song that's going to open up with the electric guitar and we want to start it off with a real strong, like a melodic line. A lot of times just using an octave to fatten up the sound of the note. Again, there's no harmony involved, so it's really just one note happening. So octaves translate over to modern worship and modern rock music really great also. And I'm going to plan an example here for you of how I might use octaves to open up a song. Say we're going to start a song with a melodic guitar line, and just to fatten it up using those octaves to really bring it out. So I'll play an example here for you. This is off of one of Paul Baloche's songs, Arise. And I'll play on the acoustic line first and then show you how I would use the octaves over that part. This might be what the acoustic guitar is doing. Then bring in the electric lead line. that sounds so much fatter and fuller than if I was to just play it on one single string. It wouldn't have the life that the octaves have. Play it, example there. So a lot of times using octaves in your solo work is a great tool just to mix up playing a single note thing, throwing some octaves in, and as well, just as a hook for a song, octaves can work great for that too.
One of the things I want Ben to talk about is the whole right hand. What does the right hand do in electric guitar? Because I know a lot of times when you're playing electric and you have your distortion pedals on, sometimes you're accidentally hitting other strings that you don't really want to be ringing out, but it's all this extra noise, and it's kind of an art, really, to learn how to sort of mute some of those other strings. So can you talk about kind of what's your right hand doing?
Yeah, a lot of times my right hand, sometimes I am just strumming full open chords, but a lot of times my right hand can help to kind of control, like you were talking about, control the sound from getting too overblown, especially if I have like distortion sounds on. Sometimes having it full and just ring out is cool, but sometimes you want to keep it more under control. And so, just for starters, a palm mute technique, just lightly laying your palm, the edge of your palm, over the strings just gives it a slight damping effect. And that's one great technique, just to bring the dynamic down that still feels intense, but the volume level is down. So, there's that technique, and also just muting other strings with your left hand as well. Sometimes that comes into play, especially in the octaves, using the octaves technique that we talked about. For doing a solo line, I'm just playing these two strings, but I've got to mute some of the strings in between.
Yep.
Like that one's muted by this finger touching it. So some of your fingers will be pulling double duty sometimes. This low string touching with my index finger, and then the top two are also muted. So the only ones that are coming through are the ones I'm actually, wanting. It takes some practice to get exact with it, but you want to have it so that you have it all muted, and you can give a full strum with your right hand. Now, I'm really giving it a hard attack, but the rest of the stuff isn't, it's kind of cool. So we gotta find a bad one. There we go.
Yeah, right. So instead of doing that, you're muting it kind of with kind of your pinky and...
Yeah, and some of my index fingers doing a lot of work on those top two. And same thing with with power chords. A lot of times you don't want the top stuff ringing out. It doesn't fit. So here again, got that string muted by my pinky, just touching it. And for each individual person, I think you work at it in your own way, but just trying to get a tight sound. You want every note you're playing to matter. You want it to be a part of the music, as opposed to stray.
and practicing this stuff so much of guitar is just muscle memory. So a lot of times, just if you're watching TV or watching a movie, you don't even have to make noise on your guitar. You can just have your guitar in your lap. This is just kind of a practice suggestion. And you can make some of these shapes and just quietly kind of make that bar chord shape and get used to, get your fingers used to muting some of those open strings and move it up here. And kind of you'll start to develop a feel for it, and it's that muscle memory, but it's just repetition, repetition, repetition. But I find that the more you just kind of have a guitar in your lap, you're just watching the news or just watching something, you can just have that in your lap. You're not really bothering anybody, but you're still actually building the necessary technique.
Yep.
So the other right hand thing, what about just your strumming technique, picking technique? Is there anything else you're doing with your right hand?
Yeah, of course there's a lot of different strumming patterns that you can do with the right hand to try to fit the groove of what's going on. We think oftentimes that it's just the drummer's job to control the groove, when really everyone in the band should be facilitating the groove. So even if the drummer's not there, you still have to carry on the groove. So lots of different grooves that can happen in the right hand based on the accents that you're playing. something with accents there, or could just play a straight thing. A lot of times even just a straight eighth note downstrum can be great for rock and modern rock type stuff. But here again, you want to have your strumming not be out of control. You want to have it be forceful but really exact. And again, just comes with practice and doing it a bunch. And then also on electric as well, we can be picking parts.
Yeah. Check out that right hand. That's really very controlled and very...
So a combination of trying to go up, down as much as possible, alternate picking.
Man, and a lot of times, I must say, that kind of stuff looks so easy. It's deceptively, it looks simple, but it's very difficult to do that just clean and in time and in tune without any, and a lot of times, again, I see a lot of young guitarists just want to shred and play everything fast and rock out, but all of a sudden you may be in a studio situation or in a worship situation where all it calls for is just a nice, simple, picking pattern like that, and guys are just completely lost. They're like, because they never take the time to really work with those triads and those picking techniques. I just find that to be, that's something you do really well. It's just consistent. It's in time. It's in tune.
I think that's one thing. Guitarists in general, I think our tendency is to rush ahead of the beat. It's easy for us to rush ahead. So I'm always thinking about trying to lay back. Almost make it feel really laid back in the groove, and usually that's when it starts feeling right, is when it's called being in the pocket, and just really laid back and try to, even if it's a really energetic part, always try to, tempo-wise, and it comes with working with a click, try to stay real relaxed tempo-wise so that it locks in. Okay, so next we want to get into some effects and things like that, and for electric guitar, more than any other instrument, perhaps keyboards, but it's a lot about painting. It's almost like an artist with their palette of colors to choose from. With electric guitar, it comes down to having a lot of different pedals into the mix. There's different types of guitars to work with and also different types of amps. And I'm just going to get into a little bit of what I use on my effects board and how I would use it in different settings. And we'll start just by taking a look at the board here and going through what I've got. There are a lot of different types of effects. But this is primarily what I use for my live board when I'm playing live, doing concerts live. And start off, cable out of my electric guitar into, I start with my volume pedal. And I'll demonstrate all of these in just a moment. Go into the volume pedal, and then I run out of my volume pedal into my wah pedal, which is this one right here, with a short cable. And then from my wah pedal out to my tuner, and then tuner out to an overdrive, and then this overdrive to another level of overdrive, a thicker overdrive sound, and this one over here to a thicker distortion that I use more for leads, things like that. And then I come out of that, and it can be kind of a puzzle putting it together, but once you get the cables the right lengths, it can it can work. You try to get it as small as possible so it's easy to carry around. But coming out of the distortion here, coming into my tremolo pedal, and then out of my tremolo, coming down to my delay pedal, and then my delay to my boost pedal, and then my boost out to the amp. So that's kind of a general signal chain is what we call that. And the idea of it is just to try to keep your cables as short as possible, because we want to have the distance from the guitar to the amp be as small as it can be to preserve the sound of the guitar. If the signal gets too long, if we start using too much cable, then we can start to lose tone. So we want to keep the signal as short as possible while including as many effects as we want. That's kind of a lot of times that's the trick, is we want to have a lot of different effects pedals, but keep it tight and short. So there's a variety of different types of pedals that you can use, and there's many different makers that make similar pedals, so it's really up to you to find out what pedals you like, what pedals suit your needs the best, and each individual person will find that they gravitate towards different pedals. So try as much as you can, and remember, You don't need to have expensive gear, you don't need to have the most expensive stuff, but you do want to get good quality stuff that's going to last a long time, pedals that are built well and going to last a while. So I'm going to take you through my pedal setup and just show you how I would use these effects in a live situation. I'll start off with my volume pedal, and basically the way I'm using it now in my signal chain is the way I would use my volume knob. Basically I'm just have that on the floor now, where I can do that with my foot. So if I have it all the way back, my signal's dead, I get no volume, and then I have it on. So I can fade into the sound. This can be a great technique when using things like, it's called a volume swell. And we'll get to delay in a second, but if I add a bit of delay into this, and perhaps a bit of overdrive, this can be great for just real, like, warm sounding pad textures. Slowly swelling in and out, so there's not a harsh attack, but we're just getting that kind of, again, like a pad type effect. And in the same way, using that volume pedal, I can do more of a single note swell as well. Maybe for just a line over the top of, if we're in a free-flowing moment, or a time when I can just add just a single note line and swell it out. So volume pedal, a great tool for a couple reasons. One, you can mute your signal just by pulling it back, but also for those swell type effects, it can be really useful. And the next pedal I have in my chain is a wah pedal, and wah pedal is great for its sound. So just by pulling that back and forth, I get that frequency sweep, kind of a funky effect. And so the wah pedal is great for that type of a thing. And next to my chain is a tuner pedal, and if I could recommend one pedal to you that you have to start out with, it's a tuner pedal, because there's nothing worse than a band playing together and you've got guitarists who are out of tune. So the first pedal I would recommend is a tuner. Again, there's different kinds, but I use the Boss TU2 chromatic tuner. And just to keep, I'll usually tune after every couple songs just to make sure that I'm staying in tune. Even if you've tuned up at the beginning of a concert set and you go 3 or 4 songs into it, sometimes on electric, particularly if you've been bending strings or anything like that, it can send the guitar out of tune. So going through the tuner, this also, when I step on it, it kills the signal. So there's sound, step on it, and then it mutes the signal. So that's really great for, again, if you're in a live setting, tuning without, having to tune with everyone hearing you. So muting the signal, and then I just look down at my little display with the arrows, and it shows right where I'm at, and I just tune up. And yeah, really, really great tool and a necessity for playing in a band, for acoustic and electric guitar players. And then I'm coming from my tuner pedal down here to my first level of overdrive. And basically what we're doing with overdrive pedals is simulating what a tube amp sounds like cranked up. Okay, so we're getting these, trying to get overdriven sounds without an amp that's blaring. And a lot of times, particularly in church situations like my own, you'll have a situation where you can't have a ton of volume. So we're trying to get a good overdrive sound out of these pedals. So this first one here, I have set it just to really kind of lower gain. You can still hear the clarity and the transparency of the notes, but it's got a little bit of grit on it. Okay, so that can be great for rhythm stuff. And even by bringing my volume back, I can clean it up even more. So I usually have one overdrive pedal set with just a little bit of drive on it, so it gets some hair on the notes, but not so much that it gets too muddy. So that's my first layer of overdrive, and then my second one is set at a bit thicker level of distortion or overdrive. So this would be what I would mainly use, for a thicker. Thicker overdrive sound. A medium overdrive. And this next one is more of a distortion sound. And I can use it for thick rhythm distortions. But sometimes if you're playing with a band there and it depends on the style of music you're doing, but a lot of times too much distortion can muddy up the sound. So a lot of times I'll use this, in coordination with my delay maybe, for more of a lead type sound. It's a higher gain sound, so it yields more sustain. So a lot of times for single note stuff, it can just cause it to bloom and be a fuller sound for lead work. So that's my distortion pedal. And then we're coming over to the tremolo pedal. And tremolo is just a cool effect. A lot of the old Fender amps from the 60s started using tremolo effect. And it's just a really cool, almost Leslie-like effect, but it's a little different. Like a Leslie speaker with an organ, and just kind of a pulsing effect that can again just add different colors and textures. A lot of the role of the electric guitar player again is about adding different colors and different effects to the sound, different colors to the sound, and so tremolo is great for that. And we can set it at that type of a setting, or I have some knobs here, and these are big ones I can turn with my feet in a live situation. But there's also a very hard tremolo, which is just very, very sudden on when it's coming in and out. So I wouldn't use that as much. That's a lot more of a specific effect. But a lot of times, just using a subtle tremolo, maybe a slower speed, can just be add just a real nice texture to what's going on. And you can also set it in rhythm with what's going on if you were going to try to keep with the drums. So that's pretty much what the tremolo effect is, and this one in particular has that hard soft switch, and then it also has a half speed effect. So when I step on it there, it brings the effect down to half speed. And that engages the effect on and off. And then we come down to my delay pedal. And the delay pedal can be used in so many different ways in music. Basically, all delay is an echo effect. And this particular model I have is the Boss DD20. Line 6 also makes a great one called the DL4. But this one gives you the option to store different types of delay in different channels. And the cool thing about delay is you can use it as a rhythmic thing as well as use it to slightly, if you just put a bit of delay on your sound, you can use it to fatten up your sound or fatten up your leads. Just give it a thicker sound. And you can also use delay, like I said, in tempo with the band. That's a really cool thing about delay, using it with the drummer. And this pedal here allows me to tap in the tempo that the drummer's playing to live. And I have this set at, it slaps back, the echo hits back at a dotted eighth note rhythm. And so I tap this into the tempo the drummer's playing. So the delay is filling in all these spaces in between even what I'm actually playing, so it can be used really cool in a rhythmic way like that. And so using this tap tempo pedal can really lock things in. If you have your delay and the timing isn't set quite right, a lot of times it can get out of sync with what the drummer is playing and can, again, muddy up the sound. So with delay in particular, you've got to be really careful that you're using it in a way that adds to the sound again, instead of just kind of clouding everything up. If you've got too much delay happening, it can muddy the signal. And so we want delay can be a really cool and strong effect, but using it in tempo and with clarity. So we can use it in a rhythmic way like that. Again, a lot of times I'll just set my delay at a low setting, just a very subtle slap, and it's almost not even there. And then when I'm hitting overdrive pedal, it's almost unnoticeable, but a lot of times it'll just give it a little bit more thickness to the sound than if it wasn't there. Just a little bit of extra something in there. So that's kind of a great way to use delay, to just a subtle rhythm thickener, if you will. And then also using a stronger delay, where it's a little more pronounced, and again, trying to keep it in tempo, but with a lead. Gives it a lot more body to the sound, which isn't necessarily, you wouldn't want that in every situation, but sometimes with leads it can really help it to kind of sing out a little more and give it even more thickness to the lead tone. So those are some uses for delay. I'm also, when I'm playing in these loops for the acoustic guitar part, this has what's called a sound-on-sound recorder in it, and it allows me to play in those patterns, like those rhythmic patterns. And it will keep looping that. And it's a great tool for practicing your scales, or working on solo ideas, or working on parts that you can play with that looping effect. Really, really great tool for practicing. So that's the delay pedal. And then my last pedal in my chain, it's going to just a boost pedal, which all this pedal does really is just giving me a volume boost and a slight tone boost in the mid-range. So it helps it. I use this if I'm going to take a solo and I want it to pop out in the mix a little more. So I can give myself just a bit of a volume boost. So it just pushes my signal out, and you got to be on good terms with the sound man to use this one. Hopefully you're on good terms with your sound man. And he trusts you enough, and your band trusts you enough to have a boost pedal, that if a solo comes, you don't have to have communication like, okay, boost my signal up. You can just step on this pedal, and it'll just give you a louder signal. So this is the pedal board that I use for most live situations. I try to keep it, again, as small as I can without too many pedals going everywhere, but try to get as many of the bases covered of the sounds that I want, that I use a lot, that are important to me. So this is just a look at what I use. Sometimes I'm swapping out different pedals here and there. But again, remember the important thing is you don't have to spend a fortune on pedals and gear. Just get stuff that works well, though. Maybe saving up a few extra bucks just so that you get stuff that does the job well. You want to make sure that you have that covered. So this is a look at what I've got and what I use on the road. We've covered using a basic pedal board setup, and I want to get into just a bit using some more eccentric effects for those of you who are looking at kind of expanding your pedal board rig. And there's so many different types of effects we could get into, lots of different options. I just want to go through a few things here that you could use for more of a ambient type effects, different types of sounds that aren't necessarily maybe regular guitar sounds, just getting into a bit different sounding stuff, a bit of ambient sounding stuff. So one thing you can use is using our delay pedal in a really thick way and an ambient way, along with the volume pedal. I talked about volume swells a bit. Got a real thick delay on it, and the delay actually has a bit of like chorus and modulation on it. So it just gives it a real kind of warm sound, and you got to be careful with that too, otherwise it can start to sound slightly out of tune, which we don't want again. But there's an example of using delay in a really textural way. Another thing I've got here is this Line 6 pedal that does some really wacky stuff. Few examples, and particularly how I've used them in songs. At the beginning of the song Hosanna on Paul's new CD, there's kind of this effect right here. Almost sounds like a keyboard type effect, and just used in the opening of that track, just listening to that, just as an effect to kind of bring something in for a different type of color, a different type of sound, just to give it a unique thing. And that's called a seek wah, so it's kind of a tremolo wah filter thing. This is actually the Line 6 FM4 filter modeler, so it models a lot of different types of synth type sounds, keyboard type sounds even. Real kind of interesting effect there. There's a lot of different models on this. Also, do more of an auto wah type of thing. So lots of different interesting stuff like that. Again, you probably wouldn't use effects like this in every song, but just looking for some different types of sounds, there's a lot of interesting stuff out there for electric guitar. And one more I want to show you that I use pretty often in a live setting is called an EBow, and mine in particular has seen better days, but use this a lot, again, for more of a ambient type effect, and you can do little melody lines with this. And all it's doing is creating a little magnetic field over the string. So I'm never picking the strings, I'm just holding this over. And the closer I get to the pickup, actual pickup, I'm on the neck pickup, the closer I get to that, the hotter the sound gets. And I'm just using that with a little bit of overdrive here and a bit of delay. Be kind of a cool effect as well. So again, there's so much stuff out there to try. Just want to give you a few ideas of stuff that I use and in what different settings I've used them. I want to talk a bit about using a capo with the electric guitar as well. A lot of times we see capos on acoustic guitar and use them on acoustics, but it's usually not as common that we use them on electric guitar. But it can be a great way to, again, find a part that we might be hearing in our head and perhaps it's in a specific voicing that we can't, maybe the song is in the key of F, and we really are hearing some open strings happening, but just not able to voice that out in standard tuning. So using the capo in a similar way we would with the acoustic guitar can just give us a chance to get those open strings ringing. And an example of this would be on the song Offering, just the part that I would play over the chorus of that song. Again, just a simple counter melody type part, but just with the capo on the first fret because we're in the key of F, and just play this chorus part. That's basically the part I'm playing for the whole chorus. And using the capo just allows those two top strings, in essence, to be open or to be droning over the top while I move that little melody note line. Okay, so that's a great way to use the capo. And maybe I was playing along with the acoustic, some thicker chords to help to double the sound. And I wanted to play some of these open chords. We talked a lot about the electric guitar being higher up on the neck, which is a lot of the time that's the case. But sometimes we do want to fatten up the sound with these thicker chords along with the acoustic. So if the song was in A flat, maybe once in a while I'd want to do capo on the first fret. Get some of those open sounding chords kind of with the acoustic guitar. Again, to try to complement it, not walk on it, but just if it fits right, that can be a great use of the capo as well on the electric. A lot of times guys ask me about getting a good electric guitar sound in church, and how can I accomplish getting a great tone in a church setting. And it's true, a lot of times electric guitar can be a really overbearing instrument. It's easy for us to just kind of crank our amps so we can hear ourselves really loud it's easy for us to dominate the volume of a band. Easy for guitars and drums as well to be really overbearing. So it's important to be conscious of playing in a band, playing with the band and not overpowering everyone. There's a few different things I've worked with to try to get a good stage volume that's not overbearing but still has a good feel to it. For me personally, I tend to be a little more old school in my approach in that I like a great tube amp that I can kind of crank up and get the tubes working and get the speakers tightening up, and then use my pedals to push it into a good overdrive distortion sound. And in the studio sometimes I'll just plug my guitar straight into an amp and crank up the amp to get it to overdrive. But a lot of times in our church situations we can't have it at 140 decibels. We can't have it super loud, so we've got to find ways to keep our stage volume down. And a couple of things that I found to be really helpful, if you want to stick with a tube amp and use that to get your tone. If you have a similar setup as me, a lot of times just getting a smaller tube amp is a really great way to go. A lot of times I see guys who have we've got our big Marshall stacks, and we're just barely getting it off on one, so it's just barely on, but not quite, and that's about the right volume level, and it's just this huge amp. So a lot of companies are making really great smaller little 15-watt amps that you can actually crank up, and it gets the tubes working, but it's not really loud. So using those is a way to achieve great tube tone without blowing away the whole stage. And a lot of times too, if you're using an amp, trying to face your amp up at you from the ground and facing it in as opposed to beaming the congregation or the audience in the face. Trying to make sure that you are the one who hears yourself the best. That you're hearing your sound the most first, and that it's not somebody off in the third row over here. So using a smaller amp, kind of keeping it pointed at you. A lot of times as well, there's guys who prefer more of a multi-effects and all-in-one pedal setting, and those are great as well. I tend to gravitate more towards having one individual pedal and it doing its thing very well, but there's a lot of companies making great multi-effects pedals as well. And Line 6 is one that makes one called the Pod XT Live that can go direct to a soundboard or a house sound system so that there's no stage volume whatsoever. And it's got a speaker emulation and amp emulation that makes it sound really close to a great sounding tube amp. And a lot of guys use these and find them really useful to just keep their stage volume down. The sounds have gotten a lot more authentic. When they first started coming out with digital stuff, it was a little scary, but they've come a long ways, and there's some really great sounding stuff out there now. So you'd plug straight into that board, out to the house system, and then just get a little bit back in your monitor, and can really achieve some great tones that way as well. Sometimes if I am going to use a larger amp like a Vox AC30 or a larger Marshall amp, sometimes if you have a little lockaway room or can put it backstage, that can be really helpful too. So you can crank it up in the back or in an isolation cabinet, or just baffle it in with some materials, and then you can crank it up and get a little bit back in your monitor so you can hear it. That can be a great way to go if you do have a larger amp that you're working with. I want to talk a little bit about using a multi-effects processor now. And this one I'm using here is a Pod XT Live. Perhaps you're not looking to do a bunch of individual pedals. You'd really love to have something that does everything in one box. And this is a great unit for that. It's an affordable product, and it's a great sounding deal. It's got a lot of different effects in it. Basically, all the effects that I used on my pedal board, this has covered in it as well. And it's in a very compact size. And also with this particular unit, you can run direct to a house sound system, even if you don't have an amp on stage, and can get some really great sounds going through the sound system without having the stage volume happening. So this has a lot of the same sounds we worked with. Overdrive type sounds. Subtle tremolo type of thing. Also has a bunch of different types of delays like we use. And within each of these parameters, you can get a lot of different types of sounds. So if you are looking for something that's more of a all-in-one unit and at an affordable price, this is a great way to go. So I've tried to cover a lot of different effects today and tried to be as extensive as possible, but even with the time that we have, there's just no way I could cover everything that's out there. So with the companion workbook you have, I've tried to outline even some more effects that you could try out: chorus effects and flangers and phasers, and the list kind of goes on and on. Just so many different ways you can paint and texture with the electric guitar, which is one of the things I love so much about it. So just go out there, try as much stuff as you can, find out what sounds you like, and again, it's going to be your voice coming out of the guitar. So try to get your own unique sounds, as well as drawing from as many different places as possible, learning from as many different places, and then ultimately finding what your sound is.
I want to talk about this whole palette thing. I know you've already talked about sounds and tones, but just another way to look at it that, back in my electric guitar days, I used to look at it like a palette, like a color of colors, like an artist would have his palette already set up with various colors, and I would just try to have like 3 clean tones, kind of some predetermined clean tones, maybe one that's really glassy, like he was just playing there, or one that's maybe more of a jazz tune, one that would be more clean for a country or more of a clean rock, but at least having some options that you can go to. You've already thought it out ahead of time so that you can always go there. And then having 3 crunch tones, I would call them. Add whatever word you want, but 3 good crunch tones. Like, to me, that was a crunch tone when you came in with that distortion. Now, you could have come in a little lighter, right?
Yeah,
Can we just demonstrate that for a second, just to show? Maybe on a certain song that would have been too heavy, and so it's good to have crunch 1, crunch 2, crunch 3, and then you kind of decide, just as if you were a painter. How much red do you want in there, or how much purple do you want? Do you want a deep dark purple, or do you want a kind of softer lavender kind of a purple? And I mean,
I want the softer lavender.
Not to get weird, but colors and sounds, they really are just vibrations.
Yeah,
they're the same thing. But
I think that's such a cool thing about particularly electric guitar and keyboards. Those 2 instruments in particular have such an opportunity to, you can just be playing 2 notes, but depending on what colors you've added, like you're saying, it can just add a totally different mood to the song. Yeah. And you're playing the same notes, but using effects to your advantage.
Yeah. And I'm just suggesting this, if a lot of these effects are new to you, sometimes it can be overwhelming, just the choice, the options, the paradox of choice, where you have so many options, you're kind of frozen of going, man, I don't know, should I have this, should I have that? It's good to just spend some time and come up with 3 clean tones, 3 crunch tones, and then 3 good lead tones. And those are your kind of always default kind of tones. You can always kind of go to those and know that they're going to work in a situation. And so let's just play that, let's do that same part with 3 different crunch tones. And we won't do the whole part, I'll just do like halfway through it. So we're going 1, 2, 3, 4. Hallelujah. We want to lift you higher. Hallelujah. We want to lift you higher. Okay, now what are you doing there configuration-wise?
Yeah,
Pick
so here
up and part.
I'm on my bridge pickup of the telly, and so it's bright enough to cut through, and in a full band situation, it'd be able to cut through the mix. And then on my pedal board, I've got set up my lowest gain overdrive, so you can still hear a lot of the clarity of the notes. It's got some grit on it, it's got some overdrive, but not so much that it gets too saturated. So if I want to keep things a little cleaner, I'll go to that first level of overdrive.
That's really important.
Pretty mild, but still has some guts to it.
And you use that a lot in church on Sundays. There's a lot of times where you don't want the electric just to come in and be super rock, 80s rock or something, You're just wanting to give that chorus a lift, And so just by having one of those first levels of distortion, just where it's clean, but it's just starting to break up a little bit, and it just... So that would be one. Let's go to the next level then. Yeah. So he adds a little bit more. So we're going 1, 2, 3, 4. Hallelujah. We want to lift you higher.
Yeah.
Now, what did you do differently there?
So I'm just going to a different pedal. Basically, these 2 overdrives are similar in sound, but so that I don't have to be changing a bunch of knobs mid-concert, I just have one set at the lower gain, and then this one that I just used set at more of a medium, little thicker gain setting. So I can flip one off and flip one on to change the sound.
So in a sense, you really do have this sort of palette thing going on. You sort of have your option 1 distortion, then a slightly stronger distortion. Do you have another one that's even heavier?
Yeah, a little over the top.
A little over the top distortion. Here we go, folks. 1, 2, 3, 4.
So pretty thick. I mean,
very good.
In a band context, it might fit a little better. It's with the acoustic and the electric together.
Right,
It seems
right.
a bit heavy.
It's true, but it does. There are times where I'll tell you, there's the tune "Your Name."
Yeah.
At the end of the tune, I hear that each time we play that. I hear you kind of start off kind of clean, and then I hear you go to the next level, and then I hear you go to the next level,
Yeah.
and it really does make a difference. I count on it, because it just makes each successive chorus stronger and bolder, if you will.
I think trying to think about that, the dynamic journey across a song too, is really important for electric guitar for that reason. You can start off, really mellow, and then trying to think in waves, so you're not just at this plateau, start off with my thickest distortion, then I got nowhere to go, but try to make it sort of a journey, even just in my own parts that I'm playing.
That's excellent. So saving that third stage distortion, if you will, maybe for that final rockin' chorus, because all of a sudden, just when you think there's nowhere else, you can't get any more intense, all of a sudden the last chorus comes in, and you step on that final pedal, and it's like, whoa, we're just flying here, and can make a huge difference. Again, Your Name, if you want to check out Your Name, like from the breakdown until the end of the song, give a listen to what Ben's doing, and you can hear that sort of go from kind of just a slightly broken distortion to a stronger one, and by that third chorus, I mean, whenever we play it live, that third one, I look over it and I'm like, I'm waiting for it.
Tone begins with the guitar we're using. We can get all sorts of different kinds of pedals and amps, but tone starts with the guitar. And so we're going to look at a couple of the different types of guitars that are really common that you would use. And there's three main types: the Telecaster, Stratocaster, and a Les Paul. And I've got a Telecaster here, which is probably the simplest setup of all three. Just has two single coil pickups, one in the neck and one in the bridge. And Tellies are often known for more of a country sound. They were made big with country music, but they're also a really versatile guitar for rock as well. And so I'll start here just with a clean sound, just to demonstrate what the different pickups sound like. So we're on the bridge pickup here, which is going to be a brighter sound. It's got a lot of bite to it, and it's really, a Telly bridge pickup is really great at cutting through a mix. You got to be careful, it can get harsh if it gets too bright, but it's really great at cutting through a mix. And so a lot of times for lead work, I'll go to the bridge pickup on the Telly to really make it pop out and what's going on. And then if we go to the middle position, we've got both pickups together. And this is more of a glassier sound, a real kind of mellow and well-rounded. It's kind of a pretty sound. So that can be great for just picking through arpeggio type stuff. Kind of a bell-like tone, if you will. So that's great on the Telly for that sort of thing. And then we can go to the neck pickup, which is a warmer, darker sound. And can be great for bluesier soloing, or just getting a darker, warmer tone out of the neck pickup. Be great for a clean rhythm as well, so it's not cutting through, it's just blending with other instruments really well. Now we're going to check out a Fender Stratocaster, and one of the great things about a Strat is you have 5 different pickup positions to work from. So we've got 3 single coil pickups with the Strat, and 5 different actual pickup positions to give us a variety of different sounds. And so we're going to start with just going with the bridge pickup. Again, this is going to be a brighter sounding pickup just by itself. And I'll rarely use a Strat bridge pickup by itself, but it can be cool for some applications. So let's check out just what that sounds like. Kind of a brighter sounding thing. Then if we go to the second position, this is a classic Strat position. It's using these 2 pickups together, and it creates somewhat of a bell-like tone. U2, the Edge from U2 used this sound a lot in conjunction with delay, and made this a classic Strat pickup setting. So very bell-like quality of the sound, real kind of chimey, if you will. And then the third position we're going to look at is the middle position. Now this is really rare. In fact, I very rarely use the middle pickup position on a Strat. Just the single coil in the middle, and really kind of a neutral sound, not overly bright, not overly dark, just kind of has its own thing. And then we'll go to position 4, which again is these 2 pickups together, so it's a bit more of an out-of-phase type of sound. Some people refer to it as an out-of-phase type of sound. And it's like similar to position 2, but just more bass, because we're at the neck and the middle pickup positions now. So Okay, and then the final position, which a lot of blues guys, man, they gravitate towards this immediately, going to the neck position on a Strat. Stevie Ray Vaughan, a lot of other great blues players, Clapton, a la Eric Clapton, go to the neck position on a Strat. Single coil, it's a great bluesy sound. Get a little bit of overdrive on it. Just a little bit of grit. It can have a little bit of bite on it, just a bit of treble to cut through, but it's got a real warm, round tone to it. So that's a look at the different pickup settings on a Strat. Let's take a look now at a guitar with humbucker pickups. A Les Paul, this is an SG, very similar to the Les Paul. There's also Paul Reed Smith's, a lot of different types of guitars with this type of pickup. But the main thing, the main difference between this and a Strat or say a Tele is the pickups. And it's actually, what we've got here in each of these is two single coils put together, which tonally just gives it a fatter sound, gives it a thicker, fuller sound. Humbuckers are great for rock and jazz music in particular. Again, these are just general statements, not necessarily rules. You'll find what you like as you play around with different guitars. But a humbucking pickup just gives it, a real fat rock sound, even without any distortion on it. Just gives it it's fatter in the mid-range frequencies and just fills out the sound more. So you've got to be careful with humbuckers if you're playing with a band that you don't overpower the other instruments. It depends on the style of music you're doing as well. But for rock music, they're great, man. Power chords. Just a fatter, tighter sound with humbuckers. And this one, I'm on the bridge pickup right now. And I can go to the middle position, which is both of the humbuckers together. And this is in the same way of the Tele middle position, just kind of a warmer, glassier sound. The same thing's true with the humbuckers. Just gives us a kind of a mellower sound. I would use this position for, again, more of a arpeggiated type part. Of a mellower sound. And then if we go to the neck humbucker position, it's an even warmer thing, which can be great for solos and rhythm stuff, but a lot of times for jazz type music, I'll go to the bridge humbucker position on this type of guitar. Just for a warmer, darker tone. Humbucker guitars are great for that as well. In this next section, I'm going to be talking a little bit about getting into some soloing ideas and just how I approach soloing, going through some scales. You know, I tend to think of soloing as trying to be really melodic in my playing. So you can learn a bunch of scales and go through and get the shapes down, but the idea is to learn those scales so you can ultimately forget about them and try to just play from the gut as much as possible. Try to, you know, in essence, sing through the guitar. Try to make the solos come alive with melodic ideas. And we're going to go through a few scales here that I think are helpful for just getting started at working at soloing ideas. Maybe you're just trying to get into soloing for the first time. And the pentatonic scale is definitely the place to start for that. I'd say probably 70 to 80% of all rock guitar solos are based out of the pentatonic scale. And so we're just going to take a look at this. We're going to play it real slow. Again, there's no need to, as you're working on this with the companion workbook, no need to take it fast. You know, just start out slow, but try to play precise and accurate. So we're going to start out with the pentatonic minor scale. And we're going to start on the 5th fret here, so it's an A minor pentatonic scale. And just play through this. and that would be the first position of the pentatonic scale. And even just within that shape, there's so many different great solos that have been played just using that shape. The thing about the pentatonic scale is it's got, and any scale really, but the pentatonic scale, you have 5 positions that you can work from. So it gives you, working your way up the neck instead of just staying in this one position. So that would be the first position. And then we move up to the second position. Okay, same notes, but we're just moving it up. One position. Then we'll go up to the third position. Third position there. Fourth position. And then the fifth position. Back up to the original position. An octave higher. So in using this scale, there's so many great licks that have come out of the pentatonic scale, and another great thing about it is that you can use it over a minor key, or a bluesy type sound. Works over both of those, but you can also use it over a major key. And the way this works, if we're in we worked on this as an A minor pentatonic scale, well, it's also the same as a C major pentatonic scale. And the way you find that is just start from your root note, and then if you go up 3 half steps and start with that note, that's your major key. So all of a sudden it sounds major and bright. So a lot of guys, when they're working on soloing and using that scale, don't realize that you can switch over to a major key really easily. You just have to remember that, in this position, that we would be in like a key of C major, working out of that scale. So take that, slow it down, practice that over and over with a metronome. The important thing, again, is accuracy and to try to be steady with it. Another scale I want to touch on is just the simple major scale, and this is utilizing, there's 7 notes in a major scale, 8 including the octave, and so we're going to go through just a couple different positions of using this major scale. We'll start on an A, we'll go through an A major scale, all in the same position. So you'll notice my fingers, I'm not moving up and down the fretboard, just staying in this one position. It's good to know that position. Another position that I use probably more often to play this major scale is what I call a 3-note per string major scale, and it's an easy pattern to memorize because it duplicates itself every other string, the position, the shape of it. So we've got actually is 2.5 octaves total, and walking it back down. So the idea of using the 3-note per string major scale is to try to get yourself to cover more of the fretboard. So the idea is to not just stay stuck in one position, but to try to move and make it a fluid. If we're doing a solo, making it fluid over the whole fretboard. So we can play it in this position. We can also take it up an octave and start on the A string and play through that same scale. Fingering changes slightly because of we're starting on the A string, but the scale stays the same, and as we'll see, that scale overlaps also with that pentatonic scale there as well. pentatonic scale, really the same thing, just leaving a couple notes out. So the idea, again, trying to make it a fluid solo and tying some of these scales together so that it doesn't sound like we're just up here and then all of a sudden jumped way down here, but trying to make it tie together across the fretboard. Those are a few of the main scales that I use when I'm looking at soloing. The major scale and the pentatonic scale are the primary scales I'm looking at, but there's also, man, there's a ton of other scales that you can spend time on. Minor scales, a natural minor or a harmonic minor, just changing that 7th step. So there's a lot of different scales out there. Whole tone scale. But the fact of the matter is, in a real live setting, in a band context, there's so few situations that I would use those scales in. So just want to get the main scales across, being a major scale, pentatonic scale, and just work within those and try to be musical within those. And if you find yourself in a situation where you're needing a minor sounding scale or a jazzier scales, you can look at those at a later time as well.
You know, it's worth talking about what not to do when it comes to soloing. I know as a worship leader, you know, I so appreciate Ben's heart in serving the situation, serving the song, serving the moment, you know, and not just kind of stepping out and making it his moment. But he's always conscious of, it seems to me that he's conscious of the mood that's going on and making sure that he's supporting the mood of the song or the mood of the moment. And, you know, one of the things that kind of bothers me is when, you know, we're actually singing the song and we're in the verse or the chorus and we're singing out and the guy's actually playing a solo over that part instead of just finding a nice rhythm part. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
But I don't know, can you think of a few sort of, you know, things that you don't do when you're playing electric guitar or soloing in a worship situation?
Yeah, I think, you know, the first thing, I'm always listening to where the vocal's at, because especially as we're worshiping, the vocal is what the people are singing with, you know, singing along to. So it's important to not step on the vocal. If the vocal is singing out strong, I'm at most just going to try to find spaces in between and not play all over. It's easy, I think, for electric guitarists, perhaps other solo instruments, to get, you know, we really readily we're fidgety. We like to noodle all over the place. And so to refrain, to hold back from some of that and just try to, play a supporting role, again, play a part that will fit into the song. And then when it's, you know, when it's time to play a solo, playing out and playing it aggressively, but always being sensitive to what's going on around me, trying to be as much as possible.
I know that just from years of playing with Ben, I know a lot of times, instead of just playing a blues scale or something, he'll take maybe the primary hook of the song, maybe the primary melody of the chorus, and he'll kind of play off that a little bit. So that, again, that's another way of kind of supporting the song, thinking more parts like. I notice that you tend to do that. Even if it's not the melody of the song, it always feels a little bit more like a part, you know, instead of just sort of totally getting lost.
Yeah, it is so easy to zone out, I think, in natural state, just to licks that I've worked on or stuff, and just kind of be in my own world, but try to be as engaged as I can be in what's the moment, what's the mood or the feeling of the song where we're at, and trying to fit that mood as best I can to support, you know, ultimately the worship that's going on, to try to be sensitive to that. And
you do it well. Why don't we look at, you know, maybe look at a solo, like the solo you did in Hosanna on the last record. We'll just check that out.
So let me talk about the effects that I'll have on for this solo, and it's what I used on the recording. Looking back at the pedal board here, I'll go to my distorted pedal for a thicker, higher gain, higher sustain sound. And I'll also go to my delay pedal. This song in particular, it kind of uses a unique delay tempo slapback. So I've set my delay at a dotted eighth note slapback. And then, again, I'm always tapping in tempo with where the drummer's at, or in our case, the acoustic guitar.
We'll try to redo that. So,
1, 2, 3,
4. beautiful. Yeah, and what I love about that is just the melodic repetition, you know, instead of just playing all over the place. It's like a good song, there's that repetition of that chorus or the repetition of that primary hook. And so even in Ben's solo, there's that da 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 da, and it just kind of draws you in. It just becomes another hook, if you will, to draw the listener in and make them experience the song better. What would that be like? Let's slow it down just a little bit without all the delay, just so people can get a good look at what you're doing there. And what are you thinking scale-wise, or are you playing off of your triads? What are you doing?
Yes, I'm kind of going to this. We talked about the D form bar chord, so I'm kind of thinking of that shape generally speaking, and then I'm just going to this position.
So that's basically like a G chord. That's a G triad right there, huh?
Yep, right there. There's that D shape.
Okay. Okay.
And I'm just using the G and the B string, and just going.
So 1, 2, 3, 4. Back to that, okay? Then a repetition. I love that. Chordal thing.
Yeah.
So you ended up that chordal thing, which is
kind of in that high G bar chord shape. And again, using the electric guitar and the effects to your advantage, you listen to that by itself, and it's just very clean, not a lot of sustain, but you add a little bit of distortion and the delay into the mix, and it really helps to color and fill out the sound.
Mm-hmm. Now I noticed that many times Ben and guitarists like him, guitarists, they use not just scales when they're playing solos, but they're playing off of the triads a lot. And I know you talked about triads.
Yeah.
You know, you want to talk about that? Do you tend to use triads as almost like an anchor point for your solo?
Yeah, a lot of times I do. A lot of times I'll think of it, you know, sometimes in an arpeggiated manner. Mm-hmm. If I'm creating parts for a chorus or parts for a song, a lot of times I'll go to a higher triad just because it gets me into the mindset of thinking up higher on the neck usually, mm-hmm. out of the way of other stuff that's going on. And yeah, a lot of times just flow a solo, you know, out of those shapes can come really easily.
Right, right. I remember, again, back in my electric guitar days, it's funny, that's what I did for years, was play electric guitar for different people, and then once I started leading worship, it just seemed to be less and less of an occurrence. You know, sometimes I just wish I could be in the band and just play, because I think the electric guitarist just gets the color, you know, and just adds so much dynamic and color. Yeah. But that was one of the exercises I remember was really helpful, was just that triad where you see like a G and then a G and a G, you know, and so you can kind of visualize quickly, there's your G, so, and then there's another G. But it's like you're right. Picturing those triads. And,
yeah, absolutely.
And then, you know, same thing, C, C, C. So that's just a good exercise, you know, get a metronome going at a real slow speed and just kind of go through that, you know, G, you know, 4 beats per 2, 3, 4, G, 2, 3, back to the G, 2, or you could go up higher to the G, to the G. You know, just so helpful to kind of get those triads in your
absolutely.
Brain, eh?
Yep.
It might be worth looking at how not to do it. Okay, let's take a look at a song that I thought Ben, you know, contributed a really nice, tasteful solo section. And but I think some guys might have just kind of taken over the world, you know, if they had the opportunity right there. So there's a song called Your Name on the last project, and so we're coming out of the chorus. We're going, let the nation sing it louder, 'cause nothing has the power to say. I want you to play what you played, but your name. Oh, your name. that's what you played, and I just think that it fit the mood. You know, it's real tender. It's melodic. He repeats this kind of hook or this motif. But let's take it sort of a bad way. Maybe if you were just, kind of really into yourself and into kind of showing, everybody on Sunday morning how cool you are. All right, so we go, nothing has the power to save but your name.
Maybe a little bit overboard.
A little overboard. What's funny is there's going to be some of you go, dude, that is awesome. That's cool. Because obviously there's parts of that. Maybe if you're playing for this radical, extreme youth conference and, you're really trying to reach them, maybe that's the thing. So it's funny. As soon as you say, well, that's probably not the way, I could think of an example where maybe that would be cool. But we're talking 95% of the time on a Sunday morning, on a Wednesday night, on a multi-generational worship experience. Again, that's the context we're looking at. So something like that probably would be a little over the top. But if you were just doing some radical youth night and it was more of a concert, let me say, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Say it's hard for you to be bad, man. What can you say?
Jeez. I feel like, just thinking about the mood of the song, like thinking about the lyric, which I think sometimes we have to slow down as players sometimes and think about, okay, what's even the lyric of this song?
Mm-hmm.
It's your name, strong and mighty tower. It's just so focused on, God that it's like, almost seems, it seems weird to detract from that in playing something really flashy myself. So just trying to, not do that, not detract from the moment of what's going on and where the focus is.
Right. And I'll just say, there are times where, man, it fits the song to step out and wail, and really rock and not be reserved at all. So I don't want some of you guys to feel like, oh, man, you can never turn up past 2 or you can never step on that distortion in church or somebody's going to be upset. I don't think that's the case either, right?
No, I totally want to encourage you guys, too. When it comes time to take a solo, man, play it with confidence. Step out, know that you've worked on stuff in the practice room and play it confidently. And crank that thing up. Hopefully your team trusts you enough to crank it up. But play it like you mean it, like you want to sing through it instead of just cranking up just for the sake of cranking it. But play it confidently, absolutely.
Yeah, I think the cardinal rule, if there's a cardinal rule, is to make sure that all the elements of the song support the feeling of the message. Whether you're writing a song or you're arranging a song or you're performing a song. Your goal is to make sure that all the elements support the feeling of the message that you're trying to convey. So if you're trying to convey this, really celebratory, like I'm thinking maybe because of your love, like you did a really fun, stepped out, unapologetic kind of solo. Yeah. So let's do that. Let's take it from the halfway through the chorus. Because of your love, we lift you up. So 1, 2, we lift you up. Songs of freedom, forever we're changed because of your love. Oh, thank you, Jesus. Because of your love. Yeah, it's killer. Another song that kind of has that sort of over the top kind of solo, but it fits the feeling of the message is I Will Boast. I mean, he definitely just stepped out unapologetically and said, man, I will boast with my guitar. So maybe let's kind of show that. Let's see, halfway through is I will boast in the Lord my God. I will boast in the one who's worthy. He's worthy. Yeah, man. That just rocks. And just that, again, another thing, what I love about that is that how you, it's sort of like a theme with a variation, you know. So he's not just playing scales, he's thinking parts. And a lot of times I think you come up with that because you're almost kind of singing a part, aren't you?
Absolutely.
Kind of in your head.
Yeah, I think the most memorable solos are ones that have some sort of a hook, you know, that you can be drawn back to. The repetition of the melody kind of works like a hook to a song.
Yeah.
Real similar.
And then he kind of breaks out and you do that thing and he ends on that funny note, which is, at first he was almost like, oh man, I don't like that note, but it just sounds so kind of garage band or punk rock or something, you know, just kind of hanging out there.
A little wiggle.
Yeah, so let's do that very last line. So 3, 5. I just think it's just kind of, it's wild. It feels out of control, you know, and
Yeah.
the song is like, I will make my boast. It's kind of an out of control kind of moment.
So we've just talked about being very in control, very controlled. Now we're out of control.
Again, that's why I'm glad, you know, sort of the cardinal rule, we declare it today, is make sure all the elements, especially the guitar elements, support the feeling of the message that you're trying to get across. Well, man, sweet, man. This has been awesome. I wish we could go for 4 or 5 hours. I mean, we just opened up the can of worms here, and we've just gotten started, really. But I hope that, you know, in these 2 hours, you know, you can rewind and spend time going through this material over and over and over again and really become fluent with some of these concepts. And if we left anything out, we're sorry. Aren't we sorry?
We are. We're very sorry.
But maybe
hopefully
some
a lot
of
of good stuff there.
Yeah, hopefully. You did awesome, man. And hopefully, you know, there's some of the terminology that maybe is a little foreign to you. We were talking about numbers and 5 chords, and let's go to the 6th chord, or if there's some kind of music theory terminology, let me just suggest going to the website and checking out Music Theory Made Easy. A lot of the concepts that we talked about will make even more sense if you understand the basics and the fundamentals of music theory. And Ben was a part of that project, and where we tried to really distill the idea of music theory and make it very understandable and comprehensible. So, comprehensible.
I think that works. Stick
Does
to it.
that work?
Stick to it.
So, man, we just pray that you just continue to have fun growing. It's a lifelong adventure, just getting better on guitar and just becoming skilled and trained up in music for the Lord. So, God bless you.
You're coming back again.